Burlington County's first courthouse was not located in Mount Holly, but rather in the city of Burlington, the original county seat. Francis Collins was commissioned to design and build the courthouse. In return, he received £100 and a tract of land. The original courthouse was built in 1693 at the intersection of Broad and High Streets, not on a corner, but right in the middle of the intersection. There was a market area downstairs and the court located above.
And a fairly substantial building. It lasted for about 100 years and gradually was deteriorating. As a matter of fact, there's a diary that someone wrote, and they said one of the ugliest buildings in Burlington City was the courthouse, and it was not in good repair. And so they wanted to build a new one, and the freeholders refused to allocate the funding for this a replacement courthouse at that time. And so the state legislature actually intervened, and they said, okay, we'll have a referendum. We'll allocate the money, but we'll have a referendum as to where the courthouse will be located. And there were three candidates. One of them was Burlington City, of course, and the other was Mount Holly. And the third was Black Horse, which is present-day Columbus in Mansfield Township.
In February 1795, voters went to the polls at Town Hall in Mount Holly to cast their ballots in the special election. Voters cast a total of 3,250 votes. The final tally showed Mount Holly won with 1,676 votes, compared to 1,432 for Burlington and 142 for Black Horse.
One of the interesting things was that the vote actually took place in Mount Holly, in the town hall in Mount Holly. And so there was a controversy over that because they said that some of the charcoalers, the pinies we would call them today, the guys that were working down in the Pine Barrens, would actually came up in the morning all black-faced because of their work, and then they went down to the creek and washed their faces and came back and voted a second time. So the election was contested, but of course nothing came of that. The people of Burlington never forgave the people of Mount Holly because they were really frustrated at the fact that their city, which was the provincial capital, lost this dignity, the honor of being the county seat also. And as a matter of fact, Mount Hollyans would fear going into Burlington for years after the movement of the courthouse to Mount Holly. They would even be refused drinks in the bars of Burlington City. And someone wrote once that the Burlington people were so upset that the courthouse was removed from such a beautiful city as Burlington and placed in such a sand hole as Mount Holly. And so they spoke disparagingly of Mount Holly and the location of the courthouse. And it took a generation to get over it.
Mount Holly did prevail in the vote and was declared the new seat of county government and site of the new courthouse.
And so the freeholders empowered a group of people to go out and purchase a tract of land for the construction of the courthouse. That selection committee contacted Joseph Powell, who resided here on High Street, and purchased a block of land for £210, where the courthouse was ultimately constructed.
And certain key individuals from Mount Holly were put in charge of the actual planning. One was the tavern owner. One was the mill. He ran the mill, and another Joseph Budd was in charge of it. He actually had a clock business in Mount Holly. So they were involved in the planning originally. And eventually Samuel Lewis was hired as the architect, who was famous for his work at Congress Hall in Philadelphia.
Michael Rush from Mount Holly was the carpenter. Judges John Lacey, Isaac Cowgill, Josiah Foster, and Ebenezer Tucker presided over the first session in the new courthouse on Tuesday, November 1st, 1796. The first case was Jeremiah Pickering versus John Butterworth for money owed. When the sheriff was ordered to impanel a jury, Butterworth's attorney withdrew his client's plea, and he agreed to pay the debt owed plus court costs. John Lawrence's commission had expired, so Samuel J. Reed was appointed clerk of the court. John Smick was the court crier. The interior of the building has been greatly altered since that first court session.
In the original style, as you walked through the front doors of the building, you would walk through a second set of folding doors into the courtroom. These days, all the benches face forward towards where the judge sits at the front bench. That wasn't how the courtroom was originally set up. Originally, you would walk through the doorways. There would be hanging candelabra, chandeliers, fixtures, and they would light those candles every day when court was held. A series of benches were slightly elevated facing a platform in the center of the room. The attorneys would sit at tables on that platform, as would the jurors. Then in the front of the courtroom, there was a long table where the sheriff, the clerk of court, the court crier sat, and they would bring the litigants or the defendants up to that particular table. And then there was the bench in the back of the courtroom where there's a rounded wall, also indicative of the Federalist style, and the judge sat in front of there, elevated from the rest of the courtroom.
While much has changed, the original trim remains over the doors and windows, as does the elegant interior stairway. The building's facade is made from two plentiful regional materials, marble and brick. Originally, the building was decorated with white trim. Later, the brick was painted white and the trim was changed to dark green. The courthouse is an example of the federal style of architecture. The cupola, decorative detailing along the roofline, elliptical dormer window, and the building's symmetrical plan are all hallmarks of that style. There are additional features that reflect the courthouse's federal style, which is a refined variation of the Georgian style. The 5 equally spaced upper story windows, for example, are positioned directly above their counterparts below, resulting in a balanced appearance. There is a belt course that divides the 2 stories. Each of the courthouse's large windows is adorned with shutters.
At the front of the building, the entranceway is marked by 2 oak doors, a fan light above it, 2 round-headed windows flanking either side of the door, and a lantern metal-style light above it, all encased in a classic pediment above for the coat of arms of New Jersey, creating a central focus point for the entranceway to the building.
The other thing about the exterior of the building, something that stands out for me is the coat of arms, which is over the main entrance. It's the state coat of arms. It sort of indicates how politics worked even back then. It was donated by Isaac Hazelhurst, who had property here in the area, and who asked the freeholders to deviate the route of Monmouth Road from Burlington to Monmouth around his property. And so as a gift to the freeholders, the coat of arms was donated.
John Johann Eckstein sculpted the New Jersey coat of arms over the doorway. Eckstein, who immigrated to Philadelphia in 1794, was a renowned painter and sculptor at the Prussian court. He was best known for his death mask of Frederick the Great. The building has an open cupola which houses the courthouse bell. The county bell was cast in England in 1755 and purchased for £29, 10 shillings. The bell was first located in Burlington, where tradition maintains that it rang to announce the Declaration of Independence in 1776.
It was rung actually on the reading of the Declaration of Independence from the steps of the old Blue Anchor Inn, Metropolitan Inn in Burlington City on July 3rd, and the bell rang at the reading of the Declaration of Independence. Eventually then it was brought down here to Mount Holly and was placed in the belfry. It was rung at the start of every court session. But if there was a famous trial here in the courthouse, they would ring it because the people would come. It was as popular then as court TV is today. This was the best show in town. The people would come from the town, and especially it was a famous trial. You'd have the galleries filled. So when the case went to the jury, the people would leave and go downtown Mount Holly, go into the taverns and the water holes, and some of them would go home. Then the bell would ring when the jury came back with the verdict, and then people would rush back to the courthouse. Today it's rung at the beginning of the reorganization of the freeholders meetings at the beginning of the year. But the county bell is really it's a sort of, I call it Burlington County's Liberty Bell. It has a lot of history associated with it.
The original building format took on a footprint that started at the entranceway on High Street and ran to the back of the main courtroom that was located on the first floor. There have been several additions over the years that have added on to this particular building. The first occurred in 1798 when they decided that they needed a place to house the prisoners. And so they fashioned out a jail room in the basement of the courthouse. And that stayed really for about 10 years until they started to house more prisoners than they had room for. So in 1810, they constructed a jail immediately adjacent to the courthouse and is now known as the historic prison.
The surrogate's office on one side of the courthouse and the clerk's office on the other side were built in 1807. The configuration is similar to the famous grouping of Independence Hall, Congress Hall, and the Supreme Court buildings in Philadelphia.
Ultimately, in 1926, there was another addition, again to the south and westerly side of the building, adding on additional office space and chamber space for judges. In 1993, the county undertook a major renovation of the building, and to make it historically accurate, they brought in an architectural firm from Philadelphia who did a prodigious amount of research on the building and kept with the color schemes. That particular renovation was in excess of $2.3 million to fashion out changes to the building that would make it compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act and give us some further capabilities of the buildings. But the architects were true to the original architecture of the period, even in as much as picking the electrical fixtures for the building. So the electrical fixtures in the main courthouse, the original 1796 structure, all mirror candelabra fixtures, which would have been in use at that time. In what we call the back of the house, in the chambers areas of the courthouse, they used gaslight type fixtures that would have been present in the 1880s editions and beyond.
The old courthouse at Mount Holly has been described by Fenimore C. Woolman, a noted architectural historian, as, quote, one of our priceless American architectural inheritances, standing virtually as it was built, an enduring memorial to the most elegant period in early American architectural history. Its very dignity precludes any idea of unseemly conduct or lack of majesty in the administration of the business of meting out justice.